his political brand, the idea that Donald Trump was a fighter. He likes to say that he will be fighting for the forgotten man. That was, his campaign theme back in 2016 and 2020 for a time. I had a Republican strategist not affiliated with the campaign who I was talking to earlier tonight who said, you can't buy a photo like that. I mean, this will become an iconic image in our politics. All of these pictures of Donald Trump from tonight, because there are so many that are kind of already going to be seared into the minds of people who've been watching some of this coverage. The photos and the fact that it's Donald Trump himself who's defined much of what we know about tonight, I think, really, with that one post that he made on his Truth Social platform just before 9 p.m. It was he that confirmed or said that he had been shot. In fact, when at the time, much of the early reporting had suggested that perhaps it was a ricochet or a piece of glass. But no, the former president said in that post, it was in fact a bullet that hit him in the upper ear, on his right ear. He said he could tell exactly what was going on. He could hear it as it was happening. He expressed in that same post condolences for the other victims, a thank you for law enforcement. And interestingly enough, I was thinking in the context of the congressman's comments about, whether they had heard somebody else in the day who might have been making threats. At the time of that Truth Social post, the former president said nothing was known about the shooter. That just before 9 p.m. tonight. Now, who knows to what degree he would have been briefed on an investigation into his own assassination attempt at that point. But that's where we were a few hours ago. And Hallie, as we sit here now, we remain a bit in the dark about the former president's movements. We know only that he's left the Butler area. His campaign has, by rule, basically not been commenting really about this assassination attempt at all tonight, but are, I think, particularly and understandably guarding quite closely his movements at this hour. He had his plane with him there at the Pittsburgh airport, but we don't know whether he's going back to New Jersey, as had been the original plan, or perhaps to one of his other residences tonight. We do expect to see him on Monday in Milwaukee for one important piece of business, of course. He has to pick a vice president. He has to pick a running mate, and he has to do that by basically mid-afternoon Monday, or they're going to have to rework the convention. And I will say just one final thought again, as I was listening to your conversation with the congressman. The statements that we have from the RNC and from the Trump campaign thus far are basically the show must go on, that the convention will move forward on Monday. But the idea that a convention can be completely redone from the ground up is not totally a new phenomenon. Obviously, we saw the conventions rebuilt from scratch during COVID in 2020. And I remember the first convention I ever covered in 2008, a Republican convention, had to be completely reworked. One day of programming completely dropped to accommodate a hurricane halfway across the country. That it made it seem inappropriate to be holding convention-related activities at that time. And so there will be no rest in Milwaukee tonight, I suspect, for all the folks, some 50,000 ultimately, who will be there hoping to put on that event for the Republican Party that's now sort of rethinking quite a bit, I imagine.
Garrett, thank you. That tees us up for Vaughn Hilliard, who is in Milwaukee. And Vaughn, I want to preface this by saying in the next couple of minutes, we expect to see a news conference from Butler, Pennsylvania, perhaps a critical one, as we do think we're going to hear from both local and federal law enforcement officials about what happened at the rally, about the next steps moving forward, and about where this investigation stands. There are a lot of questions still on that front tonight as our team continues to report out details, including that multiple sources are telling our team that the suspect appears to be, who is now dead, the suspected shooter, 20 years old, just about, from the state of Pennsylvania. As that is happening, there is that split screen, of course, where you are in Milwaukee, as Garrett and I were just talking about, Vaughn.
Right, and there's also a question tonight exactly where the presumptive 2024 Republican nominee is headed. We know that he has left the Butler area. It was not intended initially for him to come directly to Milwaukee. The main primetime festivities, the convention formally opens inside of the arena behind me here on Monday, though the several thousand delegates that will be in attendance and will be formally nominating him on Monday here in Milwaukee, they are already in town. There was a reception this evening that was on the books being put on by Reince Priebus, the former RNC chair, who is from the Milwaukee area, is essentially serving as the host of this Republican National Convention. That reception was canceled here tonight. There are other meetings that are going to be taking place here around the greater Milwaukee area tomorrow. I'm told that those are proceeding as normal. There is no indication that the convention plans are changing in any way. I've talked to several delegates here tonight who suggested to me that this only intensifies the energy and the importance of the convention speech that Donald Trump will deliver in prime time on Thursday night. Garrett said it. He still has a vice presidential running mate to make the selection of. There is a lot on the line for Donald Trump in the next 4 months. There is a potential sentencing date still in Lower Manhattan that he could very well face. And I can only tell you, Hallie, over the last 9 years, you have covered this campaign so closely as well. The intensity on the ground among voters on the left, on the right, has only increased with each passing year. And this year, more than ever, the understanding of what is on the line in this rematch of Joe Biden and Donald Trump on November 5th, 2024 is very well understood. And when you see the thousands of folks that come out to Donald Trump's rallies in the heat of the summer, like it was today in Pennsylvania, or a couple weeks ago in Nevada when it was over 100 degrees, there is a passion and intensity among so many to have that individual return back into the White House. Today, we are less than 4 months from the presidential election, and we expect the former president of the United States and presumptive Republican nominee to be here in Milwaukee for the Republican National Convention in less than 48 hours, Hallie.
Vaughn Hilliard live for us there in Milwaukee. Vaughn, thank you. I want to show you now the scene from Butler, Pennsylvania, where we are awaiting at any minute. You see the microphones there. The chairs set up a news conference from federal, state, local officials on what has happened today. And you see it there in that just unprecedented banner on our screen. The former President Trump has been hurt in this apparent assassination attempt, a moment that is clearly reshaping this political campaign. The former president, he says, his campaign says, is fine. He is safe. Mr. Trump describing how he heard the bullet whizzing past his ear, that he was shot, that the bullet pierced his upper right ear. We've seen those images, too, of blood on his face. You see it there as we are now waiting for that news conference to begin. And if you're just joining us or have been watching for the last couple of hours, we want to give you a sense of the moments, what it was like when it happened and after there in Butler. Listen.
Take a look at what happened.
Move it there. Hold. When you're ready. On you. Ready. Move. Move. Go.
Hawkeye's here.
Move it to the stand.
Get ready.
You ready?
And then as he moved his head to look at the chart up on the screen, that's when he got grazed in the ear. If he had not moved his head at that nick of time, it could have been a lot worse.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. It's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. We cannot allow for this to be happening. We cannot be like this. We cannot condone this. And so I want to thank the Secret Service and all the agencies, including the state agencies, that have been engaged in making sure that people who, and we have more detail to come.
I'm definitely shook up, but I'm okay. Yeah, and Trump was talking, watching him. I heard pop, pop, pop. I thought it was like a cap gun. And my son's like, God, get down. And next thing you know, everybody around us was down. And then once we got down, we was up at the top of our bleacher. The men were yelling to all the snipers and all the cops to come over because he had shot a man and a woman in our bleacher.
The scene as it happened just after 6 o'clock Eastern time. Here we are pushing midnight on the East Coast, and we expect to get an update from law enforcement any minute. Evie Paporis, a former Secret Service agent, is with us now. We understand, Evie, that Secret Service will be briefing along with federal law enforcement, local law enforcement. Help us set the table for what we might expect to hear in the next couple of minutes.
So they're going to break down what they do know and then what they're willing to share. Obviously, this is an ongoing investigation. We're not going to get all the facts. It's likely they may share the name of the individual. They may not. It depends what they've done. Because think about it. You want to go and interview all the people that are connected to this person. You also want to make sure that there are no other individuals connected to this person in committing this crime, committing the assassination, that it was a network of people. Those are the things you want to look at. They're going to talk about where that person was positioned. Interestingly enough, it's how did that person get there? That's a big question that everybody's asking. Yes, it was outside the security perimeter, but how did that person get there? How did that person get access to the roof? These are all the different things people are trying to understand. And what protocols were put in place and what are they going to do? So you're going to hear the what have we done so far? Where are we at now? And what are we going to do moving forward? Likely with the U.S. Secret Service, they're going to talk about their resources, how they're moving with protection as they're going forward. We're talking about the RNC. You've got other candidates coming in, especially if former President Trump is going to announce who his VP is. So the Secret Service isn't going to turn off. This is still going to go. And you're going to see more resources and more assets put into place. So it's going to be a breakdown of the investigation and of how things are moving forward when it comes protection-wise.
Evie, thank you. I'm going to ask you to stand by. We want to listen in now to this news conference that is happening in Butler, Pennsylvania. We're bringing it to you live here on this NBC News special report.
Are we ready?
Let's listen in.
Is everyone ready?
I'm ready.
Ready?
I don't know.
All right.
I don't know if all the cameras are.
So my name is Kevin Rojek. That's R-O-J-E-K. I'm the special agent in charge of the FBI Pittsburgh field office. The first thing I want to say is that the FBI stands with the people of Butler County in Western Pennsylvania, and our hearts go out to the victims of this heinous act which occurred today. This is our community, and I want to let the public know that the FBI has deployed a number of our resources, including investigative agents, our evidence response team, bomb technicians, and we have additional resources coming from other field offices, as well as from FBI headquarters, including our evidence response from Quantico, Virginia. We have intelligence analysts as well, working from our field office in Pittsburgh, working feverishly to attempt to identify the individual who did this and any motives behind why this was done. Right now, we need the public's help. Anyone who was on scene, who saw anything, who identified any information, please report that to the FBI using either the phone number 1-800-CALL-FBI or online at fbi.gov/Butler. This evening we had what we're calling an assassination attempt against our former president, Donald Trump. It's still an active crime scene. As I mentioned, we have a number of agents on scene. We also are working closely with other federal agencies, our state partners, and our local police partners as well. Again, at this time, we are not prepared to identify who the shooter is. We are close to that identification, and as soon as we are 100% confident in who that individual is, we will share it with the press. With that being said, also, we do not currently have an identified motive, although our investigators are working tirelessly to attempt to identify what that motive was. At this time, I'm going to turn over the podium to Colonel Chris Paris from the Pennsylvania State Police.
Thank you very much. My name is Colonel Chris Paris, P-A-R-I-S, Commissioner of Pennsylvania State Police. I would just like to say that the State Police have been in regular contact with the Governor's office, and the full support and assets of the entire agency are behind the FBI and our other federal and municipal partners to assist with this investigation. The thoughts and prayers of the Pennsylvania State Police are likewise with the victims of this terrible act. We are prepared to support this investigation in any way, shape, or form, and we stand ready to participate in a full, fair, and competent and thorough investigation. To give you an operational rundown, Deputy Commissioner of Operations, Lieutenant Colonel George Bivens, is behind me, and he will discuss the operational portion that's being conducted by the Pennsylvania State Police. Lieutenant Colonel Bivens.
Good evening. So let me describe for you a little bit about the scene that we have over there. As you know, there was a grandstand, a very large area, a lot of people there when this all unfolded. The former president had come out and begun to speak shortly after 6 o'clock this evening. And within about 10 to 15 minutes, a number of sounds were heard, and it became apparent that shots were being fired in that direction. It was a chaotic scene. Law enforcement, I believe, acted heroically, quickly identifying and neutralizing the threat, as well as responding to assist the various victims. PSP had a significant presence on the scene along with all of our federal partners at the time of the shooting. We have since enhanced that presence significantly, bringing in resources from all over the Commonwealth to ensure that we have a speedy, thorough investigation. We are working very closely with the FBI as we work through this. As you can imagine, because of the variety of crimes that have been committed, some are under federal jurisdiction, some are under state jurisdiction. And so, we're working through all of that, not an issue at all. We work seamlessly, but the FBI has maintained the lead on the attempted assassination. PSP will take the lead on the homicide and the shootings of the other individuals in the grandstand area. And so there are a lot of witnesses to be interviewed, a lot of things to be processed. There were some complicators that hopefully the next time we speak, we can describe for you, but some complicators that slowed down some of the processing and the positive identification of the shooter. But know that at this time, we have no reason to believe that there is any other existing threat out there. We are doing everything we can to make sure that this is thoroughly investigated, and that if there is any information developed that anyone else was involved, that between PSP and the FBI, that will very quickly be followed up on. So I think at this time, we would open it up to questions from all of you.
Was this a lone wolf attack?
Again, I think it's too early to say that. We have one shooter tentatively identified, but we're not stopping there. We're following up on a lot of information. It will be some time until we can conclusively say or answer that question, I
How
think.
long do you think that gun was designed, hiding up there? When you saw the snipers up there, you know, as the crowd was kind of rolling in and looked at that pretty good viewpoint to check everyone out. How long did that guy been up there?
Again, that'll all be part of the investigation, but
Can you come up to the mic, please?
that will all be part of the investigation. But I can tell you that preliminarily, it appears everything unfolded very quickly. So, you know, again, we'll have more information on that, but it's just too early to start definitively saying this happened at this exact time. And
But it wasn't like he's inside the security perimeter, right? That building he's on is outside of it?
That's correct.
How far outside of it was it?
We'll have that information for you. It was some distance outside of the
Colonel,
security
can you
perimeter.
comment on reports that there were people who saw someone on the roof and tried to alert authorities?
We're following up on those. I will tell you that I am aware of those, and I am aware that law enforcement had responded to a number of reports of suspicious activity. The specific response to this will be all part of the after action, but yes, law enforcement was responding to check on several suspicious occurrences.
What were the other suspicious occurrences?
That'll all be part of the investigation.
So you said that you're close to identifying the shooter. Could you at least confirm that he is from Butler County, Pennsylvania? Is there anything else? Did he have any affiliation with that company, do you know?
So again, we're not prepared at this time to provide the identity of the potential shooter. We're in the process of doing the confirmation, and once we have the confirmation, we'll release the name officially to the press. But at this time, we can't give any further information on the potential shooter.
Or his family, or what else needs to be done?
No, it's a matter of doing biometric confirmations. So there was no identification on the individual, as an example. So you know, we're looking at photographs right now, and we're trying to run his DNA and get biometric confirmation on.
Would you be able to comment on just what police found left behind? Like any possible devices? Did you find any extra guns? Just anything else you'd be willing to comment?
Not at this time. No, we're still in the process of an active investigation. So we'd like to reserve releasing any information like that until we have more facts.
Today, is there any heightened direct level, credible threat level that you guys were aware of more so than what's typical for an event like this?
From the FBI's perspective, no. We did not have any specific threat information related to this event.
Can I ask, you talked about how it happened so quickly, and we know that there is at least 2 casualties, including the gunman at this point, that we're aware of. It could have been a lot worse.
Absolutely.
Are you able to comment more about that and how it was taken care of so quickly?
So I think the credit goes to not only the Secret Service who was on site, but also the state and local partners who were there on site and were able to react immediately when the incident occurred.
Do you know how many officers fired their weapons?
I do not.
I understand that it's very early and there's still going to be a lot of questions, but I mean, is this a failure of security?
Really, at this point, we're not going to make that assessment. There's an active investigation. A lot of things need to occur investigatively to make those determinations of what, if any, failures there were. So really, we can't comment on that at this time.
So you can say if Secret Service had checked those buildings, or we're keeping a close eye, or?
Really have to defer to Secret Service for those questions.
Was there any law enforcement at the AGR property prior to the event? Like, were there police at that location at any point during the event?
Are you saying the location where the shooter was located?
Yes.
I don't have any information on that. You'd have to defer to Secret Service.
When do you think you will release, when will the name of the shooter be released? I mean, any inkling of when that might happen, tomorrow, or?
So that'll be as soon as we've confirmed 100%, we're willing to release that. So if we have, you know, as far as the contact information for the press, we should be able to do that within the next few hours, I imagine.
So there was a vehicle being checked not far from here. We've also heard of a possible related scene in Bethel Park. Is there anything you can tell us tonight about other areas where law enforcement may be searching in relation to this event?
Again, right now, we're tracking down all leads and doing all interviews and tracking anything that we can regarding suspicious locations, vehicles, locations, interviewing individuals. So it's all related to this event, but I can't confirm or deny anything that's going on beyond that.
Can you tell us about the weapon that the shooter used?
As far as the details of the weapon,
Yeah, what kind of a rifle was
do you want to
that?
come on?
What did he use?
Until it's confirmed, no, we're coming over.
Okay, yet until we have the confirmation of who the shooter is, and we'll release that as part of the investigative details later.
You said that you were deploying extra resources, and one of the things that you said was bomb technician. So is this standard procedure, or do you have reasons to believe that there are bombs somewhere in Butler County? I just want to, can you just walk us through that?
It's primarily standard procedure of any suspicious packages. In this case, there was identification of suspicious packages around where the shooter was. And so we deployed, in an abundance of caution, bomb assets to make sure that those were cleared for investigators to move safely in the area. We're still working on, it's still an active crime scene. So I'm not going to say that the scene is 100% clear at this time.
Why are there any Secret Service agents here right now for this press conference?
So Secret Service wasn't available for the press conference at this time.
I understand
What packages are you talking about? You're talking about packages, but just suspicious packages like what? Like you're the shooter?
Really anything. I don't have specifics on what they were looking at, but you know, there's people in the crowd will leave bags as they're fleeing the scene like this. So any suspicious packages we have to treat as it may be an explosive device.
And how quickly, this was, and I guess the Secret Service came out here to talk about, I guess, but when you guys jumped into action, all law enforcement and were able to take down that shooter, how quickly did everybody jump in and who ended up taking him out?
So it was immediate, and we're still trying to figure that out. So we'll wait till we have more definitive information regarding that investigatively.
What about the person in the crowd? Do you have any information about how they were killed?
My understanding was it was from the shooter. But again, those will be details that are released later.
Do you search homes or apartments as a part of your method of identifying the individual?
So if that's where the leads take us, absolutely.
Was Donald Trump hit with a bullet, do you know for sure, or was it potentially something else that could have?
I don't have that specific information as far as the injuries to the former president.
I understand you're not releasing the suspect's identification right now, but as you know, is this person known to you guys? Is he somebody that you guys have been looking at due to threats he's possibly made online, et cetera, et cetera?
Again, the information that we currently have, we're looking at that obviously very intently. And as we know that information, we'll release that as well. So we'll need to plan another time for a follow-up press conference. We're looking at all investigative leads and all everything from, and that's why we asked the public, because I'm sure there'll be cell phone video, there'll be all kinds of information that we'll use to fully flesh out exactly what happened here.
I know you're saying you can't say what type of gun it is, but do you know how many shots were fired?
I don't.
And
I don't have that information as far as that'll come out in the investigation as well.
Is there an identification tonight on the other victims?
As far as the civilians,
Civilians that were injured and killed?
Yeah.
So we do have identification on those. We're not prepared to release it at this time. We have notified a number of family members, but they have not had an opportunity to notify extended family and things. I would confirm for you that we did have one individual killed. And I know I heard somebody say about 2 victims. There were 3 in total besides the former president. So 2 critically wounded, 1 killed.
At this point, do you know if they were sitting near each other and where in relation to the former president were they?
I don't have their exact seating by individual. Again, that'll all be part of the investigation, but their shots were scattered somewhat, and so they weren't just into one particular location.
you're saying just one fatality as of right now?
Yes,
The shooter in one fatality.
the shooter plus 1 fatality.
Okay.
So there was 1 victim of the shooter who was killed, and then the shooter was killed.
And then 2 in critical.
Yes, ma'am.
Witnesses say they saw a semi-automatic rifle used by the shooter. Can you share any more details of this? That's what.
I've heard those reports as well, and again, we do have a good idea of what the weapon was, but again, that's all part of the ongoing investigation. And I'm not trying to be cagey about that. When the SAC talked about the need to be very methodical and to be cautious with that scene, we are doing just that. We don't want anybody else getting hurt. And candidly, there are some concerns that we'll be able to talk more about later on about just what those concerns are and continue to be.
Why would you have to talk to the shooter's family yet?
That's all part of the investigation.
After the event, there were a lot of really angry people. Are you monitoring if there have been any threats in response to this? Are you worried? Have there been any specific threats?
That's certainly a concern, and we're monitoring that whole situation. I mentioned that we're bringing a lot of assets to bear, and so like the FBI utilizing their analysts, we also have the Pennsylvania Criminal Intelligence Center. We will utilize the resources of our intelligence division and the Criminal Intelligence Center to be able to monitor for concerns about any threats, regardless of the side of the issue or the political spectrum. We want to make sure that we try and avoid any further violence.
So no, nothing specific so far?
No, sir.
Without identifying them by name, can you say anything about the other folks who were injured or killed? Were they adults, men, male, female, anything at all?
They were adults, and they're male.
All 3?
Yes.
How difficult for the Davis Spirit Department, though, or all your departments to go talk to these family members, including the civilians who were run down while they just went to a rally and try and, celebrate against the upcoming election? What are those conversations like, and how do you kind of get through that?
We have trained investigators, and we're partnered hand in hand with the FBI, again, because we've got some federal violations, some state violations. And so our investigators are going out and methodically. We have a large team of investigators that are going out, dividing up these interviews and trying to conduct them as quickly as possible. And then there'll be follow-ups. With the FBI asking for people to call in tips, I have no doubt that we will receive a lot of additional information that will also require follow-up. But again, we're working very well together, and it's only a short matter of time until we get through all of those interviews.
How close a call was it for President Trump?
There were no police hit with bullets.
From your experience, how close a call was it for President Trump?
I'm not going to speculate or comment on that.
Have any of you talked to the president? Did any of you have any kind of reaction or any?
No.
Which law enforcement agencies were tasked with securing this particular rally outside of the United States Secret Service?
Well, Secret Service always has the lead on securing something like this, but then they work very closely. And I hate to use the word routine, but it is a fairly routine matter for all of our agencies to work jointly with the Secret Service. And it really depends on the venue, on what information is out there, what number of resources are devoted to it. And we work with them to provide whatever is requested by the Secret Service, but they're the lead in that security.
Was there anything about this venue that made it particularly difficult to secure?
I would defer to the Secret Service to answer that. They would have done the initial assessment.
Was the rooftop part of what was being secured? Was the rooftop, given its proximity to the event, part of that process?
It's my understanding that was outside of the perimeter.
Did this shooter have any previous criminal history?
We're not going to comment on anything about the
Did
shooter.
any agency deny Trump's team extra security? Any of the agencies that are up there?
Not that I'm aware of.
If Trump had been the nominee already, would he have had additional security for this event?
There again, Secret Service has the lead, and I'm not going to comment or speculate on what may or may not be provided at any given point, depending on their status as a candidate. What I will tell you is that in my experience, the Secret Service does an excellent job of maintaining security on protectees. They're very cautious. They don't hesitate to ask for resources, and candidly, we don't hesitate to supply those resources.
Deputy Colonel, you're asking for the public's help. Can you elaborate and be more specific about what we'd like to see from the public, if it's videos, photos, personal accounts.
I think the videos and photos would be very helpful. And I think that once the shooter is identified, anyone that has specific information on that shooter, that would be very helpful as well to help us assess motive. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we are absolutely not taking for granted that this was a lone wolf attack. And so we would be looking for any additional information that might point us toward anybody else that may have had a hand in this.
Sir,
at this point, what is the main focus of the investigation? What's the most important thing for you right now, a few hours?
Well, there's not any one single focus. I mean, certainly the immediate focus was life safety, getting the former president out of there and to care, getting care to the other victims and trying to secure the scene as quickly as possible. It shifted then from a life safety priority to then an investigative priority. And so I guess if I had to point to where we are right now, the single greatest priority would be to identifying a motive and whether there was anyone else involved.
We're just beginning the political season. Are you guys concerned with all of these rallies that happen and how they're set up? Is this going to change maybe the venues?
Again, I would refer you to the Secret Service in terms of what they work out with the campaigns. We will continue to supply resources, as I'm sure the FBI will, and local partners as well.
When this was announced, it was, it was quite a few days and a heads up that people were getting ready to come to this Trump rally. From a law enforcement perspective, when you announce a big event like this, all that time in advance of the week out, does it give people more time to plan something like this?
I suppose, but there's a balance, I would think, that any of the campaigns on either side try to weigh. I mean, the point of them announcing it, I suspect, is because they want the crowd. And so it's not up to us in law enforcement to tell them when they should announce or how they should announce or how they should conduct it. We offer our best advice. Again, working hand in hand with the Secret Service, offer our best advice of how best to secure and protect that venue.
Sir, considering how many people were there, and you have packed in there and you have somebody at an elevated position with potentially a high-powered rifle, how lucky is it that we were only talking about a couple of victims? As sad and tragic as that is.
Well, we're certainly grateful that we don't have even more victims. And again, in terms of how this could have occurred, that will be part of this after-action report and an investigation that occurs so that we can hopefully ensure that something like this doesn't happen again.
Has an autopsy been conducted yet, or is it scheduled?
It has not been conducted
Do you
yet.
have an estimate on how many people were at the rally?
I do not.
If somebody has some video or photos, where should they send it?
So we have the 1-800 call FBI if you have audio tips, and then we set up a specific tip line for audio and video, and that's fbi.gov/Butler.
And they should send you just like any video?
Anything that anyone has that is related to this incident that they think may be of assistance investigatively, we'll take anything and we'll analyze it and we'll make the determination if it's of investigative value. Go ahead.
So from what you've been briefed on, it sounds like law enforcement only knew he was up there until shots were fired. Is that what you're hearing?
So that is the assessment this time. That
So are you surprised that a sniper was able to fire off a handful of shots at the former president? I mean,
again, we're still working through the security apparatus that the Secret Service had in place, what potentially happened. That there's going to be a long investigation into exactly what took place and how the individual was able to get access to the location, what type of weapon he had. All that it is really days, weeks, and months
but how
of
surprised are you that
investigation.
he was able to get off like 4 or 5 shots?
It is surprising, but again, to get the true all the details of that will come out later in investigation.
Going back to the perimeter of this building, I think it's going to be really difficult for people to understand that this building, with a very high vantage point, some 100 meters away where this is happening, isn't part of that perimeter. What goes into that conversation over what is in and out and why wouldn't that be?
Again, the Secret Service really needs to answer that question. They conduct the initial site survey. They do the initial security assessments. and determine where the different security locations should be. And they're the ones who are in charge of securing the scene. We, along with other state and local assets, are there to support the Secret Service and their mission.
How many troopers and agents were at the rally, obviously before the shooting, and how is that number determined? And should perhaps there have been more?
So I don't have the specific numbers. I doubt you do as well.
No, I can speak just for PSP. We had physically on site there, probably 30 to 40 members of PSP, but we also have additional resources in the area. We utilize aviation, for example, and a variety of other resources, dogs to sweep beforehand that really aren't counted in that. And again, the number is driven by what the request is from the Secret Service. You know, just in their defense, I mean, what I would want to say is it is incredibly difficult to have a venue open to the public and to secure that against any possible threat, against a very determined attacker. That's a huge lift to try and do it. And, you know, again, the investigation will really give us an opportunity to take a look at where any failures occurred and what can be done better in the future.
Lieutenant Colonel Bivens, do you know when another briefing might be held? Tomorrow?
We don't have one scheduled, but I would tell you we will let you know. I'll give you plenty of notice. Certainly, as soon as additional things develop that would be noteworthy or of interest to you, we'll get that scheduled and have another with you.
Locally, what can residents, businesses expect to happen with the investigation over the next couple of days? Like, what's going to be going on there? That people...
Well, again, the interviews will all be occurring, and so they may see law enforcement in their communities. People came from a wide area to come to this rally, I'm told. So, you know, there's going to be law enforcement fanning out, and as additional calls, photos, videos come in, you know, those additional interviews will result in law enforcement being out in the community conducting those interviews. But otherwise, they really shouldn't see any other significant impact in the
Can you
community.
confirm whether it's a male or female, the homicide, the bystander who died?
It's a male,
A male?
yes.
I'm from a European outlet from Poland, and I'm already getting text messages from, you know, back home, and people are asking, how could this happen? What's going on in America? I know that it's a philosophical question, but how could you talk to the people outside the United States about what happened here in Buffalo?
Well, again, what I would say is a tragic incident that occurred. We're not in a position to start second guessing how or why or anything else at this point. Just know that it will be thoroughly investigated. If there is anyone to prosecute, that will be done, and we'll move forward. But I don't have a good answer for you.
We'll just take one last question.
I know that PSP said that you guys were not aware of any additional requests from the Trump team for security. What about the FBI? Was there an additional request for additional security from the Trump team, and was that denied in any way, shape, or form?
No, there was no additional request for security that was ever denied by the FBI.
What does the FBI do in these events? Like, what is your role?
So we showed up after the fact. We were monitoring the event, but it was once the incident occurred that we come and we take the primary jurisdiction for the investigation. Thank you. We'll, as we have additional information, we'll provide it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you have been listening to that midnight briefing now after what the FBI describes as an assassination attempt against former President Trump at his rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, the location of that news conference you just watched, 12:22 Eastern time at this point. No identification of the suspected shooter. Now, officials said they were not prepared to ID that person, that this man, as they said, had no ID on him. They're still running biometrics, dealing with DNA. There's also no information on a motive at this point either. I want to bring in our investigative correspondent, Tom Winter. There were, Tom, some allusions to some complications or some complicators, in their words, that perhaps slowed down some of the process, allusions to reports of suspicious activity as well. Help us understand where this investigation goes, with a lot of the focus now on the Secret Service, the security of the perimeter in place, with our understanding that the Secret Service was not at this briefing tonight because they weren't able to accommodate that, Tom.
That's right, Hallie. So I'm going to deal with this security, the Secret Service component, what may have happened.